Today on the Grid Snaps podcast, making things look pretty.
Set dressing.
Welcome to the Grid Snaps podcast. Rob Howard here of Kip Carbone. We are here to talk about a basic thing, a basic skill set that you got to have to make things look good. And that's right, set dressing. I try to set it up nice, and you've said it like 4 or 5 times already. Yes, set dressing. And so, set dressing. What is set dressing? Kip, take it away. Tell the audience what set dressing is.
Set dressing. So, for those of you that don't know what set dressing is, basically you have your level, which is constructed of, say, walls, floor, ceiling, doors, windows, what have you. Could be anything. And then everything else you put into that environment is the set dressing, the accoutrement, the cups, the plates, the bric-a-brac, the barrels, the crates, anything else that gets added to it. That process of doing that and vignetting things is called set dressing. And it's in the world building / environment art job set, I guess.
Yeah, it's a basic skill that you got to have, and it's something that, what's interesting to me about set dressing is there's some skills that don't necessarily always cross the boundaries between our disciplines. Like, for instance, being able to man, I'm doing some great bevels in Maya. Probably not something that concerns me a lot, right? Versus man, look at this great scripting trick I figured out. Man, I'm really stacking these things in this array real nice. Probably doesn't affect your discipline, but set dressing is something that either one of us could do. Like, level designers can do it, environment artists can do it. Often they both do it. So it's one of those things that sits in that middle
environment
road.
Artists do it better.
That's probably true. But sometimes level designers are press ganged into art duty.
No, yeah. There's like a gray area at every studio, or I guess at certain studios, the lines of who does what is blurred, or the environment artist might just be doing world building, set dressing, and then there's a prop artist, or the names. There's, I don't know, I think there's really the career of environment art and design, and then that you could wear many hats in that field, and really It depends on the studio and how they divvy it up or how they want to have it set up.
I imagine at really large studios, you're you're multi-hundred studios, like your Bungies and your 343s and your Activisions. That's probably even something they would hire just a person to do. Like, your set dressing.
There would be somebody who's going in and, propping, or doing that sort of thing, building out the level.
And that was like that, I think, on BioShock Infinite 2, where they had strike teams that would just rip through all the levels. You might have made a good-looking, police compound or whatever, but there's going to be a crack team of set dressing specialists that come in there, take that level from you, and give it that last... put a few more of those tin cans there. Make sure that there's some good corrugated tin roofs in the right spot. I mean, I'm kind of making light of it a little bit, but that is AAA development, that level of detail, someone going in there and just being hyper specialized. But I think if you're a level designer or an environment artist and you've had any experience at all, you probably have done this. To some degree. It's just a very common thing. So we thought it would be worth talking about a little bit here, and kind of the ins and outs of set dressing, what it's trying to do, what you shouldn't do, how it affects games positively, potentially negatively. Just a cool topic to talk about. So first of all, Kip, tell me about a time that you did.
Am I being interviewed here?
Yes, you are. By me.
Okay.
Just tell the audience about a time that you did some really cool set dressing on
I was
some
set
project.
dressing?
In the past, give us your set dressing stories.
Okay, well, I can't talk about anything I'm doing now.
Of course, yes.
Recore, I guess, was the last one I did previous to that. Set dressing there. What do you want to know about it?
Well, like, okay, so that game seemed to have like an organic kind of environment. At least the environments
Yeah.
I've seen, they're like caves, outdoor areas. So when I think of set dressing, I stereotypically think of like, okay, I have a desk and I'm going to set dress it by putting a monitor and like a coffee cup and maybe a little
Okay.
trash can. What do you do for an exterior environment?
Okay. So for that, we had huge exteriors on that, like too big, I think. And like the shadow draw distance was a huge issue, and like dynamic shadows of like the small props, and just the amount of stuff we wanted to render, and it was all like on one load. We didn't really stream anything in. There was some LOD stuff, but it was like the amount of stuff that we wanted to put in and the amount of stuff that we could actually put in were two different situations. So we had to like economize it and get the right amount so it looked like a lived in, fleshed in, world, but
Right.
not, just be like a box really. The other thing was the actual like you kind of had with that game, the world was like going to be terraformed and it was interrupted, and so it was completely desolate and just this like desert wasteland. It was supposed to be like a lush jungle, but robots. And so to kind of find where these robots were at, I always had this idea that it's like a desolate wasteland, and then you see the glimmer and you see the shininess of debris and metal, and that would kind of lead you to where, oh, there's like something over there of interest, let's go investigate, sort of thing. And that's one of the that's like one of our philosophies on set dressing it, that would sort of like lead you and like kind of breadcrumb you around, and you would see that glimmer of the stuff and in the set dressing of like what you're doing, laying like a debris field of metal, or showing metallic stuff juxtaposed against the natural rock. That was kind of my philosophy in building stuff.
So I'm already hearing a couple layers above like the most kind of basic thoughts, right? Because as a level designer, when we do art tasks, it tends to be very utilitarian, because we're thinking about other things. So it's like, okay, cool, I'm going to like, put a tumbleweed here, and I'm going to like stick a cactus here. And when I hear you talk about it, it's like, well, there's these things that we know are happening in the narrative, and these pieces of art support that, and so we want to set dress based on supporting the game design, not just what looks good, in your patch of land that you're staring at. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like I try to link it to something that's going to help with the game and something that makes sense and adds to the like the gameplay experience. And what's the like every time you interview somebody, like, well, what's your thoughts on set dressing? Like, to tell a story on it. But it is to that's sort of my like, I die a little bit inside, but
right.
I mean, I guess that's what I just said, right? I don't know. So it is, but there's like there should be a methodology to it where it's not just like I put these props around here because it looks cool. The environment should look good though without it too. It should be able to, because there are certain instances where you're like, we can't afford any more objects. Like I mentioned before, that like we were really limited to the amount of stuff we could put in, and we had to really get the biggest bang for our buck and economize on it, but still able to convey that stuff. So
yeah, and the technical concerns are interesting too, because I think people don't realize that. People probably assume that in 2018, even going back 2000, whenever Recore was being made, some years ago, but still recent, there are technical concerns. Like it's we haven't gotten to the point where things are free. There's no free lunch in economics or in game making, right? And so you can't just kind of explode objects around everywhere willy-nilly. And a great example of that with set dressing that I find fascinating is when you look at PS2 and Xbox One era games and how minimally set dressed. We are looking at, I believe it was called Breakdown, but let me look that up to make sure. It was a Namco game, I believe. Breakdown, yes. Breakdown is a first-person action game by Namco on Xbox, and It's a good-looking game, for the time. Very innovative game, first-person melee.
Yep.
But you go through those hallways, and it's like you can tell what they're thinking is, what is the minimal amount of props we need to sell you that it's a hallway? Cool, a bench and a potted plant. Thumbs up.
I'm sure like that was like, wow, we got a bench, and I mean at that time, it was very limited of what you could do. So.
Right, and what people accepted too in terms of set dressing, and I think we sometimes go, and I'm getting hints of this even in some what you're saying, is we probably go overboard now with set dressing sometimes, where we think that fidelity is linked to how many Snickers wrappers we can place in a trash can next to a desk, and that's not really the best.
No, so now we get into another fun topic of contrast and affinity.
Yes.
Because if you have too much of this thing, it just creates like visual noise, and it doesn't read as well as if it's accentuated and like it pops out. And so, yeah, you can't just like throw a bunch of, which I think like on Recore, that was one of the big issues, that sort of stuff was just strewn everywhere, and there was like an even amount, there was like a smattering of stuff evenly throughout, and it would have been nicer to, like I said, like accentuate the areas of interest with more debris, and areas that were not interesting, don't put the stuff there, because it just sort of have like the natural rock, and you can distinguish where you needed to go better, or like what what was an area of interest. And yeah, I think you need to have that balance for sure and stuff.
This would be a great little spot to take a quick break, and after we take that break, we'll come back and talk more about set dressing. So, Kip, there are many ways our listeners can contact us. Let's start with you, Kip. How can they contact you?
You can hit me up at nervouspixels@gmail.com, or on ArtStation at nervouspixels, or on Twitter at nervouspixels.
Awesome, and people can track me down on the Twitter at Rojo Games. They can track me down on my portfolio website, rojogames.com. I also have a blog there that I try to keep updated on the regular. I'm also on Instagram, RojoGames80, and please support my little itty-bitty Facebook page, Rojo Games on Facebook. I think it's got my mom, some family members, and like a cat on there. So please find me on Facebook. All right, we're back on the Grid Snaps podcast to talk about
set dressing,
a topic that touches both of us because we both have to do it in our careers, and it's kind of an important kind of art and kind of level design, world building skill, but as we talked about, often abused, often misunderstood, maybe not thought deeply enough. And one thing that I've kind of learned, I think from you actually, is that this is something that really ought to be done almost systematically in layers. Like I think that the temptation is to look at it a level that you're working on out of the reality of the rest of the game. And even if you have like a collection of assets that are meant for that area, like, okay, I'm in the basement and I have the basement bucket of assets, you really need to be thinking about like the whole game when you're set dressing it, I feel like, and trying to make sure that you're following some kind of schema and trying to be systematic and not just doing it, randomly just because it looks good to you.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like underlying, like there's purpose to it, right? And if it lacks that purpose and functionality, then it becomes meaningless.
I'm trying to think about like some of the games I've worked on. Obviously, probably BioShock Infinite had the best set dressing of any particular game, and probably the game that focused the most on set dressing, right? Because that's not really throwing any game I've worked on under the bus, because not every game has great set dressing opportunity. Like Earth Defense Force Insect Armageddon is not going to have a lot of set dressing because you are literally blowing up the set as you go. So someone's not like making sure that pizza box is like put in the right spot in the alley because it's going to eat a rocket, right? So BioShock Infinite was definitely a set dressing game, a game that really tried to say a lot of things with kind of convey some narrative. I know that, and I think when you said like it's kind of like that, oh, that answer telling a story. I think the problem with that answer isn't so much that telling a story is bad; it's that that's a very surface level thought that doesn't actually tell you if there's any system to what you're doing, any kind of formula that you're trying to use.
Yeah, I think so like people. I think when it gets off, when they're like people are like, oh, I want to tell a story. When you say like you had like one of the houses in BioShock that you walk into Infinite, and like I want to tell the story that there was a guy named lived here that was named Peter, and he liked to eat cheese sandwiches, and he woke up every day at 5 a.m. and did 30 push-ups, and then like a silly thing like that, and you could see people that do that sort of thing, and it just is over elaborate. But when you're like telling a story of like, okay, well, it's a town that's like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like I'm totally blanking on it, but there's like a slick term I'd like to use for the entire world of BioShock Infinite. It's like we'll have to edit this out.
Are you looking for, it seems like you're looking for maybe like leitmotif or something that's like something that links the whole town together thematically.
It's like, it's not an alternate society, but it's like a spin-off society.
Oh,
It's sort of implied that, okay, I would say like, I don't know, Tesla actually figured out rocket technology, and then he went to, like Mars or something, and they had like a spin-off society, or like an alternate, or, or the Nazis are at like the North Pole and they're living like,
right.
There's stuff like that you can use to kind of tell a story, quote unquote, of BioShock, but, what is it? I'll figure out what the name of that thing is and say it later.
And then in the next episode of the Grid Snaps podcast, we talk about that.
We talk about Nazis living on the North Pole,
right,
and Admiral Byrd's expedition, where he found them and he had to escape.
You're right. It's the difference between like getting like sucked into just thinking about the space you're in and only that, and thinking about the actual overall story you're trying to tell, and not just the narrative, but like the world, like what is that world, and you can't, because you can't really tell the story effectively of Hank, the security guard who ate cheese sandwiches and did 30 push-ups, but you can say something about the world that room or building is in, right? Like with the architectural elements of the room itself, and obviously with the set dressing. So it's kind of that. I always find with creative aspects of the game industry, all the creative jobs, all the jobs that people kind of perceive are low skill floor, but maybe high skill ceiling, they tend to be this way where like there's your basic thoughts about how to do the job well, but then there's many, many layers above that where like, oh yes, that's what someone that's experienced at this, that's what they actually try to do, and not just like the immediate kind of first impulse of like,
oh boy, we're getting into some topics now. It is sort of like this. Environment art in general. All right, here's my like sort of take on it. Like anybody, like you can see like a sweet character somebody draws, and it's like this awesome concept. Of course, if you make a pretty good model of that, it's going to look pretty amazing. But if you can make a wall look interesting and captivated enough, so somebody would turn away from that character and be like, "Holy crap! Look at that wall. That's amazing." I think that's very powerful, and that's what attracts me to environment art. And I want to do that, and I try to do that with my environment art. And it's not just like, well, I'll make boxes and stack them. It's so many more layers to it, and you can keep peeling it back and keep adding more to it and more dimension to it. And it's just like, I think it is in its early stages, and sort of seeing stuff like Death Stranding as a topic, like that's, a great place to take this into an art form, not just like a mechanical process of throwing shit on the ground. Oh, I swore. And it's done, checkbox and Jira fulfilled.
Right.
How come it doesn't look good? Well, because there's no methodology to it. There's no there's so much more actual art to it. It's not just a mechanical process.
Yeah, and that's true for game design and level design as well. There's kind of like your most basic things like,
I'm like, why does this level play well, Rob? Well, And
Yeah,
you give me, like it's because of this, and this. Like it's not just like a happenstance. There's like
right, absolutely. And you can see this in games that over rely on randomness, because you can always tell that has a certain random feel. And even games that are really good that use randomness, it's really designed randomness. Someone somewhere is applying a lot of thought and systemic thinking to it. It's just at what layer is that being applied, and it makes a big difference to how something is perceived. And that's the same thing for your craft as well. And obviously the beautiful thing is when they all coalesce into one grand whole, which is actually rare. Like most games I find, even ones I like, are like really good at certain elements of this and like just okay at other elements. I think the games that I particularly love, like almost to the point where it's not even rational, objective admiration. It's because they actually do both those things kind of well.
Yeah.
Like, environments are really good. The design is really good. It tries to say something, and when I mean say something, I don't mean like, make a statement. I mean, say something artistically, not like some current events thing or something like that. I mean, it tries to evolve the art a little bit. And I'll use that A word, which I know Hideki Kamiya just said on Twitter that games aren't art. I actually don't really care about that debate very much. It doesn't really have a lot of meaning to me. I will say there is art in the craft, for sure. Like whether or not you feel games are art or not, there's art in the craft of making them. And that's what I'm interested in developing. So,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, is it art? It's a commercial art, that's for sure. You're obviously it's a commercial venture, and you're trying to make money off of it.
Right.
I mean, nobody would do it. I think if you can make money off of it and make art too, then I don't know. That's like what humans should be trying to do.
Right.
Yes. Make something creative and like follow creative, positive pursuits, to put it lightly. So I think the more the world does that, the better.
And in one small way we do that is through set dressing, Kip. That is one
set
small
dressing.
way that we try to make that happen. So yeah, we just wanted to do a short one on this topic, and hopefully you all thought it was enlightening. So Kip, actually the last episode we recorded, I did the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing to you again. Do you have any final thoughts on set dressing?
On set dressing. Audience? Tells a story. You could take it, leave it. I don't know. Set dressing, use it as a tool, but not as a rule.
Ooh, that's good. I like that.
I stole that from Glenn Vilppu. Okay, I'll say that. I mean, there's no tools, only rules. No, there's no rules. There's only. Wait, did I say that? Use it as a tool, not as a rule. No, so I did come up with that myself. It's my own take on it.
All right.
I think. Either way, food for thought.
All right, folks. Well, until next time, stay on the grid
and keep well hid.